Welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello there, and welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. I'm Jon Sanders, one of the co-founders of Entre Pastors, and in this episode, we're going to be talking to pastors about how to build a business around something that maybe for many of you, if you're honest, might admit you have often viewed as kind of an interruption, an obligation, something that's kind of a pain, if you will, in regards to pastoral ministry, and that is events surrounding life celebrations. What do we mean by that? Things like weddings, funerals, the birth of a child, where people have these God-conscious moments in their life. They ought to be some of the most amazing times of ministry, but I would contend for a lot of pastors, because of the expectations, the sense of obligation that's there from a lot of people that we serve in the church world, they kind of just expect that we do these extra services at no additional charge because it's our job. I mean, we're pastors, so of course we're going to pour into someone's lives in that way of providing a wedding service or a funeral service at no additional charge, or maybe just for a small gift card or something like that. Well, today's guest on this podcast has really turned that model upside down. He has built an incredible business around awesome moments of ministry. And his name is Wayne Prevett. He is the founder of Life Celebration Ministries. And he and his wife, Roseanne, in Canada have built out an incredible ministry over the last 2.5 decades or so. And now they are bringing that to the United States as well. They're showing pastors and even non-pastors how to be trained and certified as life celebration specialists, and how you can build a nice stream of revenue into your life as you're serving people at some of these critical crossroads in their life. So Wayne is a 3-time returning guest to the Entre Pastors podcast, and we're glad to have him back and to dig deeper into this conversation. So get ready for a good one. Without any further ado, here is our friend Wayne Prevett. Check this out. Well, Wayne, there are very few people who hold the distinguished title of being 3-time returning guests to the Entre Pastors podcast, but you are in the rare air of being one of those people. It might be the only one. I don't know. I'll have to go check my records and see if we've had anyone else on 3 times. But anyway, welcome back to the Entre Pastors podcast, man. We're glad to have you back.
Be here. Hey, and if it's some kind of history, Jon, I'm all into that. That sounds good to me.
Cool. Well,
something was memorable about it, Jon. We were on a call the other day, Wayne and I were, and the individual said, yeah, you were on a podcast episode of Entre Pastors, and knew just right away who Wayne was. So there you go.
By his voice. They recognize your voice.
That's right. And we say all the time, congratulations to people that have arrived, and, put them on the map. Not
Absolutely.
Really. Wayne's been on the map for a long time. He's been on the map for a long time.
It's funny because in Canada, I became known as that guy.
Oh, you're that guy.
That guy. And it was a phrase.
The Life Celebration guy.
Yeah, that guy. We need to get that guy. Well, you mean that guy? Yeah, no, that guy. Yeah. It kind of stuck, which is a whole lot better than my elementary name called Wayner or Wiener growing up. So that guy works better for me.
Well, that guy. Well, hey, Les, one last thing before we really get down to some serious stuff here with Wayne. He had texted me earlier and just said, do I need to dress up for this? And I said, just your top half. I was like, we do record the video for our YouTube podcast, but then I just asked, do something nice with your hair today. And he did. So for those that are audio listeners, Wayne doesn't have a lot of hair to do anything nice with. So he looks sharp, though.
Well, I put some conditioner on today. So, the parts that are longer at the back that, humidity affects, it's a lot better today, Jon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good. You're having a good hair day. You're on, man. This is a good conversation. So, Wayne, for those who maybe, and by the way, I'm going to link to our past episodes in the show notes for this one so people can really go back and lean into this if they want. But give just a little bit of a overview for those that might be hearing your story for the very first time, about the work that you and your wife, Roseanne, have done, the ministry, what that journey looked like for you guys in Canada, and then we'll kind of pick up the story and move forward from there.
Oh, that sounds good. Thanks, Jon. We find ourselves now in the last 20 years, I guess it's been, in the world of, we've rephrased it now, John, in the world of power and presence. So in Canada, as a secular nation, as people wandered away from the institutional church, their needs remained the same as it related to rites of passage. So the three most common rites of passage are death, marriage, and the birth of a child. So the hatch, match, and dispatch world. And what we found was that the God consciousness was still very, very real in people's lives. But we also found a massive void. It's just some new statistics that just came out just this past week in Canada. It's unbelievable the number, hundreds of thousands of churches closing, congregations closing. But it's interesting that when people go looking for someone to assist them with marriage, death, and birth, there's been this void, and it's been there for a long, long time. We came along at a really brilliant time 20 years ago, and we've enjoyed this world for a long, long time. We say power and presence because of our faith. So we believe that God is greatly interested in marriage. We believe he is very interested in death. He conquered death. We understand the resurrection to new life. He's raised people from the dead. He did a miracle at a wedding. And then when it comes to children, the Bible is just replete with God's passion for children, including Psalm 139. So we're not surprised now, but we were in the beginning at how great the God consciousness was around these areas of rites of passage. So we've come along now and said, we want to serve you. We're not going to turn you away from our institutional church. We want to draw you in, and we want to be able to be there, meet you at that crossroad. And we have seen the power and the presence of Jesus and his spirit through us become very real and very alive in these moments. It's an incredible ministry, absolutely amazing ministry.
Yeah, Wayne, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit in this interview. Later on, I'm going to tell people about a podcast that you and I did together, just a kind of a little mini series of episodes that are out there. And in that little series, you shared, so we had a whole episode designated to just some of the stories that you and Roseanne have experienced and gotten to be a part of. And I'm going to encourage our people to go listen, if nothing else, just to that one episode of the stories of life transformation, where you got to come alongside some people. I don't want to just rehash old ground. I want to, make this episode new for those that are, regular listeners going up. I already heard this part of the story, but backing up just a quick second, you and Roseanne kind of had a transition into this space that you've been in for many years now, out of what we might call traditional church ministry. And we don't have to go deep into the story of that, but here's the thing I want to highlight. And then there's another thing I want to move on to. I want to highlight that for so many pastors, we've been kind of told and adopted this mindset of ministry is something that is done vocationally inside of the church. And that's, to be in full-time ministry is synonymous with being a pastor or a missionary or something like that. And therefore, when a pastor goes through a discouraging season, maybe the ministry didn't treat them well, it didn't go well, the church failed, whatever it is, and they find themselves no longer in that role, there's a huge complex that can come along with that of, I'm no longer in ministry, I don't know who I am anymore. And I'm not saying that that is all your story, but I'm wanting you to speak to that pastor that's listening to this, that's maybe wrestling with that right now, of like, is there ministry to be found out in the marketplace if you're not pastoring a church and preaching a sermon on Sunday morning? Like, have you guys effectively been able to do ministry around this business that you've also built in this space of life celebrations?
Yeah, probably in a more effective way, John, in terms of the redemptive message. What we found fascinating was that as traditional ministers, both Roseanne and I, for many, many years, different denominations, different backgrounds, but we did find that you do have a tendency to minister to the same group of people over and over and over again. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the juxtaposition of that is we are passionate about those outside the walls of the church. At least we're supposed to be. Does that make sense? Like, we know for a fact that we should be evangelistic, that we should make disciples of all the nations. And yet here we found ourselves for 15 plus years dealing with or serving the same group of people, whether it was 100, 200, 300, 400, doesn't matter. It never really changed that much. So when we stepped outside the walls of the institutional church, we found a whole new world of people that we were able to minister to. We actually So if you look at the Canadian numbers, and it's rapidly becoming the same in the US, the statistics would indicate that we're 97% disconnect from faith communities in a secular nation. So you would find that true in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Asia, you just anywhere that we know secularism has really taken root. Well, if that's true, then the largest group of people for us to reach is outside the walls of the church. So let's just do the math. 97%. And when we looked at that, we realized, wow, we have a redemptive message that we can bring. And this will probably be the simplest, easiest way for us to connect to an unredeemed person or an unredeemed world around these God conscious moments. I had a construction company for years. In that construction company, John, I didn't find as many opportunities to speak of God as we have had around marriage, death, and the birth of a child.
Yeah.
We've sat in the homes of individuals who were pronounced atheists. And I remember the dad looking at me one day, holding his daughter, saying, I no longer believe in evolution. I believe that this child is a miracle. And I said, of God? And he goes, I'm not left with anything else.
Wow.
And I thought, that's it. That's the power of the presence of birth, people that would sit to us and talk to us about their marriage and their relationships, and would oftentimes apologize to us that they're living together. And we would indicate to them, then let's get you married. Let's go that next step and have this committed relationship. So yes, John, to answer your question, 1,000 times more opportunities for a different kind of ministry.
Yeah.
I'm not teaching the word of God to them weekly. We're not having them in discipleship classes or Bible study classes. It was a whole new world for us, but it was a world that we needed. And it was life changing for us. And we know life changing for those that we served. And I'm not talking just couples and families. Probably our biggest area of impact was actually the other professionals that we worked with, people in the funeral industry, people in the wedding industry that we became very good friends with. And the opportunities, John, endless to
Yeah.
be able to have redemptive. And that's why we call it the power and presence of Jesus Christ.
Well, and I want to get into at some point in this conversation some of the business aspects of this, and like how can someone actually build a business that is at the same time a ministry around life celebrations, and you can maybe walk us through a number of ways that a pastor could consider bringing revenue into their family, not just through doing ceremonies, but other areas that that might be connected to life celebration type stuff. But here's the thing, I want to back up and hit this theme as well, Wayne, and tee this up for you. You said there's nothing wrong with pastoring the same group of people week in and week out. And I agree with you 100%, but here's the part that's maybe problematic, or at least one aspect of it. And I want our audience to hear this. When I first met you, I'll never forget this. Like, you made a statement that because you're in the US now, right? So you're born and raised in Canada,
Yes.
spent years in doing ministry and life in Canada. Now you're down here in the United States. And you said, I feel like I've stepped back into a time machine. I've stepped back in time, and I see the United States today where Canada was just a few years ago. And so the problem with doing ministry to the same group of people, the point I'm getting to is that group of people is shrinking in most stories. I mean, there's exceptions, but by and large, if you're a pastor and you're trying to minister to your people, that's great, praise God, but that group is dwindling. And unless we're doing something, that the group that is growing at a much faster rate are those who do not walk through the doors of a church building on a Sunday. And so I want our audience to hear that. And I mean, you can take this in any direction you want, but speak to us as one who is from the future. What can pastors expect? Because there's guys listening to this right now in the Deep South, in the Bible Belt in the United States, and they still haven't gotten the memo that the church is getting ready to go through an utter shift in our culture. They haven't seen it yet because it still feels very normal, but change is on the horizon. Would you agree? And what else would you say to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This article I was referring to is a community of 100,000 people in central Ontario, and there were 9 Baptist churches. There's now 2, and the last one just closed on Sunday. That's a massive reality. The Catholic churches have closed, they've shuttered their buildings. It's a reality. It's a very much a reality in the US as well. I think that I don't want to be doom and gloom because that is certainly the last message I want to communicate. But there needs to be this reality that what we have been doing doesn't seem to be as effective as it was, say, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. One of the hardest things for us to navigate through, John, was why is this not working the way it used to? And it's really easy to get angry, isn't it? It's really easy to get frustrated with the church or the community or the people. I saw a post the other day that a gentleman had made that it takes like 9 gallons or 90 gallons of water to baptize somebody and 9 drops to keep them away from church. You know, we're not going to shame them back in. We're not going to do it. We're not going to manipulate them back in. And if you think about the percentages, let's just say on a good day, there's maybe 6% of people in Canada in church. What do you do with the 94% then? So we had to come to terms with the fact that God hasn't failed, his church hasn't failed, but maybe how we're doing this isn't as effective as it used to be. And that is a hard reality. That is a truth. So I don't have to abandon everything and walk away. But what I do need to do is embrace the reality that God is not limited, but I am. And our mindset of ministry became very limited to one path forward. And of course, these are where you can get into trouble and people say, well, it's the church and it's got to be a building, it's got to be a Sunday morning. And then they backtrack and go, okay, well, it doesn't have to be that. But what do we do? So instead of us arguing about the things that aren't working, why don't we start discussing the possibilities of how we can touch people? What do those touch points look like? And for us, we found this a very simple lateral move. There's a gentleman this past week who had made a comment online that he didn't feel that he had any marketable skills. So here he is, possibly leaving the church, entering the marketplace. Well, I couldn't disagree more. If we're in ministry, John, we probably have a passion for people. We probably have marketable skills that are unending.
Yes.
But the poor soul was limited in his ability to think outside of his box. He's got himself in a box, and that box says that ministry is limited to church and its structure that we have. See, I'm a firm believer that there is no such thing as a parachurch ministry. I reject that statement with everything inside of me. You are either the church or you are not. I see nowhere in the New Testament where the redemptive process puts some of us in the church and some of us in a para-church. I'm the church of Jesus Christ, and so are you. How we're manifesting that, if we don't change our language soon, John, we're going to lose everything faster than we could realize. So for us, we navigated one, God has not failed, and there have to be more ways to reach people than we've limited our minds to allow. So for years and years and years and years and years, we have these great athletic organizations or Youth for Christ organizations, camp ministries, and we keep calling them parachurch ministries. I look at it and go, listen, that's the church on fire and active in a variety of different paths and different ways. And that's what we need to get excited about. But if we don't change our mindset and our language, we're going to limit ourselves.
Yeah.
So we are a marketplace ministry. So what that means literally is that all of our ministry is done in the marketplace. I don't know about you, John, but that sounds like Jesus' ministry. He was in the marketplace. He literally was with people. We don't ever see evidence of him calling them to a particular place and space and time, but he lived among them. So when we minister, it's at a golf course. It might be at a hotel. It might be at a funeral home. It might be in someone's backyard or living room where we've done lots of new life celebrations. And every one of those places becomes sacred because of the power and presence of Jesus Christ. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That's what we need to get excited about. So the poor person right now who is struggling financially because his church can't pay him, which is going to be more and more and more. We've been here now in the US for going on 4 years, and I thought we were 20 years behind. It is now 10. It's now a decade away. That's how fast it's happened in 3 years.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think you have a perspective that leaders in the church would be wise to listen to. And again, it's not doom and gloom, because like
No,
you, I
not doom
believe
and
the
gloom.
best days of the church are still in front of us. But
Absolutely.
the spoils are going to go to those that can see the times, understand the times, be willing to be poured into some new wineskins. I think Jesus talked about that, instead of just being entrenched in this one model. This is what church is, this is what ministry is, and what it looks like. So I think we've checked the box to say there's valid ministry to be had in this industry that you've spent a great number of years in and around.
Right.
But I want to talk about the business side of it, because again, it's not just about, the amazing opportunities to impact people at these pivotal moments in their life. There's real money that can be made by stepping up. Now, there's a paradigm that's going to have to be shifted in this, and I'll just throw it out there. So often in the church world, at least in my world growing up, for a pastor to do a wedding and a funeral, you just kind of sort of were expected to do it as part of the thing. And you're lucky if someone throws a little $50 gift card your way. That's not what you're recommending. And you're not recommending coming at it like, kind of the copy and paste, ceremony that we just do them all the same way. And the only thing that's changed are the names. Like, it's done at a very professional level, what you have built and what you're training other people to do. It's done at a very professional level, and you're charging like a professional. So if you would talk kind of about the business side of the ministry that you're doing, and help us catch a vision for what is possible for a pastor that would really light up at this idea of, man, I can serve people in ministry and make money while I'm doing it. Tell us about it.
Well, I spoke just a few minutes ago saying that we believe this is a redemptive ministry. One of the things that allowed us to be able to navigate transitioning from institutional church to what we're doing now was we came to terms with the reality that if we didn't own our property, but we redeemed property and used it for kingdom purposes, that was an honorable thing. We gave up our building, and that gave us many, many, many more years of service. When I look at a multi-billion-dollar industry such as weddings, it's 5.2 billion in Canada. So you do the math in the US, right? We have 38 million people. You've got 380 million people. So you do the math. When you look at the funeral industry being a multi-billion-dollar industry, I want to take that money and I want to redeem it back for kingdom purposes. Now, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
See, that's how we need to view this. We need to understand that when I go into a house, a backyard, when I'm at a vineyard, when I'm at a hotel, a golf course, an old barn, wherever it might be, like Jesus, he wandered into a wedding, did his first miracle, and caused redemptive change. It's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not thinking about that because we've got our minds convinced that no, people must come to us. We completely flipped it on its head and said, no, when I go there, things change. When Jesus shows up, John, people are never left the same way. When he shows up, now you got to listen to that language very carefully. He showed up, he went. And when he went to that wedding, he left that completely different than when he arrived. And that's what I'm talking about. He didn't preach a sermon. He didn't have an altar call. We didn't sing, hymn 191, Just As I Am. He simply showed up and turned water into wine, and people were changed. So when I look at all the billions of dollars in the worlds of weddings and funerals, then why shouldn't we, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, why should we not be redeeming that money for kingdom purposes? And if it supports me financially and I'm a citizen of the kingdom, that's kingdom purpose number one. Because if I have no money and no means, I have no ministry. And that is a hard truth, because then I'm out working, 4 jobs or 2 jobs or 3 jobs. My family's not happy. I'm not happy. And that's the stories that we're reading online. So when we look at this, there's no reason for us to not take some of that and redeem it back for kingdom purposes. We take people's tithes and offerings every week. We have no idea where the source of that stuff is and where it's coming from. Some of it could be coming out of the pockets of the unredeemed. No guarantee that the person dropping those checks and money in the offering plate are followers of Jesus. but we don't ever question it. We don't hand it back to them and say, I'm sorry, you need to get saved first before I take the money. We take it. And what do? We use it for kingdom purposes. So the person that thinks otherwise will never make money at this. We wanted to make all the money we could so that we could pour it back into great resources, great materials, and great people, great training, and into our family, which sustains us and keeps the ministry going forward.
Yeah.
So couples are going to pay and families are going to pay. Matter of fact, the funeral is put on as a disbursement on the contracts. So someone's going to be paying clergy somewhere along the line. It might as well be you. And boy, we have really got to get rid of this mindset that says, no, that's not my money and I shouldn't take the money. We were accused of, prostituting ourselves for gain. Well, that's all nonsense talk.
Yeah, right.
That's just crazy talk. What you do is you go and you need to take that money. That's God's provision for you. He's just giving you that provision out of the hands of the unredeemed. Guys, listen to me. God doesn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
He's not laundering money in heaven and sending it to us on earth clean. It's coming from all kinds of resources, and we're using it for kingdom purposes. And if we don't make that paradigm shift, we'll never make money at this. So that's to set all this up to say, yeah, we've made a lot of money that can sustain us as a family. Tons of people who've been a part of us, the same thing. It gives them
Yeah.
the income that they need that sustain them as a family. You can make full-time dollars at doing this. There's no question at all. For example, I was doing 125 funerals at one funeral home in Canada before we left and moved down here. Just one home, just one funeral. That's 125. And they were paying, let's say, $300 every time I went in.
Yeah.
So there's some good return there, let alone all the weddings. Couples will not use you if you don't charge. They don't want to use you.
Yeah. And this might be a good spot too, just to speak to the level of professionalism. I know, Wayne, it's been kind of an irritant of yours, a pet peeve, and I would agree with this, to see maybe the sloppiness that is there in a lot of pastors. And I'm going to put myself out there and say this. As a pastor, I was always, most of the time, I saw weddings and funerals as kind of an interruption to all of the busy ministry and work I had to do. So it was almost an annoyance, because again, I wasn't getting paid very much, if anything, for doing these extra over and above services. And I did try to do them at a very professional level, oftentimes feeling under-resourced. Like no one ever taught me how to do a wedding or a funeral. So I felt like a fish out of water much of the time. And I think pastors, when they think of it like that, like it's hard to get excited about, wait, you mean I can do more of this? But you have a whole different paradigm in what you have built in Canada with Celebrating Life Ministries. And now God's given you a vision to really reproduce that here in the United States through Life Celebration Ministries. You're providing resources and a high level of expectation in terms of the professionalism. So I think what I want to ask you to do is speak to that pastor who's like yawning right now, going, weddings and funerals, been doing this a long time. What's the difference? Why, what do you have with Life Celebration Ministries that would maybe call them to a higher level that would thus put them in that category of a wedding professional who can charge like anyone else at the wedding industry is getting top dollar for the services that they're bringing? So speak to that if you don't mind.
No, that's great. That's a great question. The first thing starts with the paradigm of shifting from burden to blessing. You got to start there. You just need to literally right now, at the end of this podcast, sit down and go, okay, you're right. He's absolutely right. I see every wedding and every funeral as a burden. It takes me away from every other thing I need to do in terms of ministry. If we don't switch that out to blessing, then we're never going to go forward with this. So that's the first paradigm shift that has to take place. And that's very, very important. I was just doing some script work today for something I was trying to write down because Les is holding my feet to the fire to start being a better writer. So Les, you should be proud of me. All I did was I thought today.
I am, Wayne.
I know
I'm
you
really
are,
proud
my
of you.
friend. I know. 7 years of full-time education, theological education. I have 7 years of theological education, and that is not a badge of honor I wear. I'm just telling you, in those 7 years, I never once received any training or insight or guidance on how to do a funeral or a wedding. And I remember the first church, John, I ever went into, I literally prayed that nobody would die. And I
Not
thought,
because you
okay,
cared about
let's,
them, you just didn't want to do the funeral.
I just don't want to do their funeral. I hate to admit it, but I was terrified, like
Yeah,
terrified. And I think because I realized you don't get a second chance. If I really blow a sermon, John, unless I can go back, maybe God willing, the next week, if you don't get fired, maybe do a better job, right? But if you mess up someone's funeral or wedding, like it's like, sorry about that. My bad. Can we try again next week?
right.
No, that's not going to work. So, when we looked at it, we realized, and I just finished this last master's degree, and I happened to take a course for 8 weeks in chaplaincy, and I was just blown away at the fact that when it came to that part of the education in that class, in that course for chaplains, military chaplains, they were told go and get a minister's manual. So I guess when ordination happens and the sponsorship happens for military chaplains, they're given a minister's manual.
Hmm.
And my mantra is we can do better than that. We can do better
Yeah.
than a minister's manual. We can do better than insert name here. We have to. We need to. The end of life stories deserve better. The marriage stories deserve better. And we need to do better. The unfortunate reality, John, in the industry is that it's unregulated. There's no need for the government to enter into regulating who's going to lead a wedding or a funeral. They just stay out of it. And as a result of that, the race to the bottom has been won.
Wow.
If you are just a little above suck, you're amazing. And that is actually a phrase used within the industry. If you're just a little above suck, you're amazing. For us, as followers of Jesus Christ, we do believe in excellence. And we believe as servants of the kingdom, we need to do all things with excellence. I just look at God's creation and I go, I got to meet that. I got to step up. So we do provide everything at the highest level, not just dress and deportment, John, how you dress, how you look, how you present, how you communicate, right down to the resources that we make available. So
Yeah,
we
go
have
into the nuts and
literally,
bolts of that just a little bit, Wayne. Like, if for people who essentially subscribe to Life Celebration Ministries and get trained by you and access to your resources, what do they have access to? Because I really want them to hear that you've built something extremely valuable, even to pastors who are like, yeah, I've done many weddings and funerals. Maybe yes, but do you have access to resources like the ones Wayne's getting ready to tell you about? So tell them about those resources.
we were the only people. And as far as I know, there's very few that have replicated what we did. We took 6 months, we built a resource site that gives you everything you need. In Canada, they fought us on it because, like most denominations, you're to give a script to your clergy, and that's the script that they're supposed to follow. And when we got into the funeral industry, we found out there was really no identifiable difference in any Protestant service. The Catholic services were different. We found the same with weddings, let's be honest. But when we entered this world, we met couples who said, I get to choose my venue, my food, my dress, my hair, my makeup, my DJ, my music. But when it comes to the actual ceremony itself, you're telling me I have no choice? You're just going to show up with a book and you're going to pencil in my name. And when couples found that, they kept saying, we don't want it. So that's when they started asking friends and family to come along and go, if you got something, can I do this? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can I have my horse involved? And on it went. That's where the whole, celebration of life phrase came from the funeral industry was people came in, families came in and said, John, we want to bring a motorcycle in, or we want to do it at the end of the dock. And it forced change. So when we got on the front end of that and we said, we're going to be part of forcing the change. And we said, you know what, pick out all the content you want. So we have thousands and thousands of options for couples, and they can combine and build these things together. And then we work with them. But the greater part of that is being able to present at the highest level of excellence. So there's two complaints in the industry. One, insert name here. So minister's manual, we got to get rid of that. And the other thing we got to get rid of is the talking head. And the third thing we got to get rid of is the arrogance. And when couples were telling us these were the three things they despised the most about the clergy they were meeting, we did just the opposite. We became humble servants. We don't have a right to be there. And that's different than the mantra that was in the industry at that time. And that was, you better thank God I showed up to do your wedding, because if I'm not here, you're not getting married. So that attitude has created abundance of people not showing up. They're just not showing up.
Mm.
They're not, they got a better option. They forgot they had a wedding. They forgot they had a funeral. So when we entered this world, and what we hope to do is really raise that standard. We got to be way above suck, John. We got to be at a standard of excellence. And that's a
Yeah.
battle because it's not regulated. Now, I don't want government interfering like they have in Australia. Because in Australia, you have to be government certified to do a funeral in Australia.
Yeah.
And I hope that we don't do that in Canada, and I certainly don't think it'll ever happen in the US. So how do you regulate it? Well, we created our own regulation body. We created the American Association of Certified Celebrants and Wedding Officiants. And that standard means that if you want to be a part of this group, you will work at that standard, or you can't be a part of us,
Yeah.
because we will not allow those three things to be perpetuated through us. Go somewhere else and perpetuate them, but not through who we are. We
Yeah.
want excellence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the families
but
deserve it. Families deserve better. When you're sitting at a funeral and the person keeps calling your grandmother, your grandfather, your sister, your husband, your spouse by the wrong name, when they're telling stories that have no relevance to you as an individual, we need to do better.
yeah.
And we're committed to that process. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. And Wayne, I want to give you an opportunity to invite people to join in the process of what Life Celebration Ministries is all about, because you've brought what you built in Canada, you have brought it here now successfully to the United States, and things are a little different because, different culture, different country, different regulations. But what's not different is the opportunity for ministry, the need that people have, and they're searching God in those moments. They're looking for something bigger than themselves in those life moments, and it's all happening in a culture that is very quickly drifting further away from the Lord, further away from the institutional church. That's what's similar. And so I want our audience to hear, like, man, not only is there a valid need for ministry here, like there's also a business model around it. And that's what, I mean, that's the intersection of Entre Pastors. That's where we are, is, helping pastors make extra money, but also remaining in ministry, doing what they really sense that they're called to do. So you've got a training coming up at the end of, well, you've got multiple scheduled throughout the year, but the first one's coming up at the end of January. So what details can you give us on that? If someone's like, man, I think I want to jump in and be a part of this, where would you direct them to go?
Probably the safest, easiest place right now is Life Celebration Institute's a website, lifecelebrationinstitute.com. And that's a great site that's going to highlight the three areas that we have really specialized in. Our training is very unique in terms of weddings, funerals, and new life celebrations. And the training matters. I just shared with you 7 years of theological education, and there was nothing. And the minister manual doesn't train. It doesn't teach the behind the scenes stuff that we talk about. We get into the details of how to do a consultation, how to meet people, what the follow-up looks like, how do you engage them, what are the opportunities in terms of being able to talk to people. One of the most fascinating conversations we've had in the US, being in the South, John, is a couple of pastors have really, tapped into us deeply. And what they've said was very fascinating. And that is, we don't know how to speak now to the unredeemed. So if we have a couple that come and they're not part of our church, we're not even sure what language we're supposed to use, how we're supposed to talk. And that's not a criticism or a negativism. That's a reality. I know what they're talking about. We had to relearn a language of the culture, let alone all the rest of the languages around weddings and funerals. And we help you through that and navigate that. We give you turnkey website as well. So we've taken all the mystery out of, what if I want to market myself, what does that website look like? We put all the forms on it, everything that you need to have, password protected websites, password protected resources, everything that a person would ever need. The most simple lateral move, if you are a bivocational pastor, is a lateral move to doing this. This is still great kingdom ministry. I didn't find a lot of God conscious moments around my construction site. I really didn't. But I have found tons of God conscious moments when I'm sitting with a family talking about someone who's passed away, when we're dealing with a couple who are getting married. Why do they get married anyway? It's a great question to ask. And then the birth of a child,
Mhm.
it's unbelievably how profound it is that the God consciousness and the malleability of the heart is there. So
Mm.
I believe it's a perfect fit for the individual who's saying, man, I don't want to stop ministry. I'm called by God to do this, but I don't have any money. Well, this answered both those questions for us. Not only did
Good
we
to hear
have
you
to
say
shut
that.
down, yeah, we had to shut down our ministry in Canada because we ran out of money. Listen, don't come preaching to me about how hard it is. I know how hard it is. We closed the doors and handed the keys back to the guy who had 5,000 square feet that he gave us. I know how hard this is. And I know the pain that you feel. I know how you beat yourself up. I know how, I mean, let's be honest. These are hard moments to face, right? Did I fail? Was I wrong? Did we do something wrong? Has God turned his back on me? Well, we
Mm.
navigated through that quickly and said, man, none of that stuff is true. And my spiritual gifts are still active.
Mm.
How do I do it? John, we are
It's good to hear
ready
you
to
say
take
that.
people. Yeah. And just come on in and let us educate you, train you, love you, encourage you, empower you, inspire you to go out and do greatness in this world. And I got to tell you, the money is there. People will pay. But if you put relationship first, the money's going to follow. If you put the money first, your relationships are never going to be what they need to be. And we walk you through that. We tell people exactly how to make money at this. And it has been, well, there's a lot of money, like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
told
also
you.
true. Don't you think it's true, Wayne, that there are numerous reasons for a person to step away from being on a church staff, and whatever that might be, it might be beyond that person's control completely, or it may be something more deliberate, just in the life stage that they're in, and they step away. But here's what doesn't happen: you don't stop having the heart of a pastor when you discontinue being an employee. You still care about people, you still care about the gospel, you still have a shepherd's heart, and this is a way, a real strategic and special way to be in the lives of people and do all of those things that God's called you to do, and still not necessarily have to be employed by a church in order to do that.
You don't have to be employed. You're doing your own thing.
Right.
And the revenue that you have comes into you and into your family, and it's not having to be shared somewhere else. Bless the whole pastor thing. I just confessed to John 2 weeks ago how hard this has been for both Roseanne and I.
Hmm.
We have gone now for 20 years, waking up still day after day after day saying, God, how do we serve people effectively? You're right. The pastor's heart never goes away. So, how do we do it? Well, I can say this, guys. Listen, when I married a couple in the mid-afternoon and at 11:30 at night, the bride calls me and says, "Can you come to the hospital? Our youngest fell on the dance floor and they don't think he's going to make it through the night." He was 18 months old.
Mm.
That goes right to the pastor's heart.
Mm.
This couple were followers, they were satanic followers. They
Mm.
were committed to this satanic cult, and they called me. And when I got into ICU, I went into something I've never seen in my life with tubes and monitors. And they said, "Can you do something?" And I said, I brought some oil with me. I'm going to pray over Jax right now. And I said, "I want you guys to stay." And she goes, "I'm not staying." And they both left and left me in the room. There was no one there. And I anointed this young kid with oil. Guys, listen, I was crying. I was heartbroken. I was way out of my element zone. Like I turned green in hospitals. I should not be ever in a hospital. And I prayed over this kid, and he lived for 7 more years
Mm.
beyond that night.
Mm.
And they would call me on his birthday, and I would go by the house and I prayed over him again year after year after year. When he died, I did his funeral. Guys, listen, that's a pastor's heart, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If we tell ourselves that there's not opportunity for ministry here, we're wrong. Like we're far more ministry opportunity here. And I'm not going to bash truck driving and working at Home Depot or Lowe's or selling retail, all of that is good. But I'm speaking to the person now with that deep passion for the kingdom, that this is a perfect fit. So I'm appealing to that pastor's heart right now, males, females, I don't care who you are, but how do I continue to serve God when I see my current ministry coming to an end? Some of these situations, Jon and Les, listen, they're moving, they're picking up their families and moving to another state to try to find a better way to make income. I'm telling you, stay right where you are. I'll walk you through how to do it. You don't have to uproot your family and spend $10,000 moving somewhere else. Let's make it happen right now. We need an army of people in this world.
Yeah.
Because like so many places where the church has stepped away, Satan steps in. And because Christians have said, hey, we're not so sure we need to be in that world. We need to be there, and we need to be making a difference every day. So that's the appeal. That's the appeal.
Yeah.
Right there.
And one thing too, I know we're coming up on a hard stop, so we got to wrap this thing up. But one thing too is because of that, Wayne, Life Celebration Ministries is really not primarily focused on pastors at all. We're sharing it with this audience because we believe in the intersection there of ministry and the marketplace. But really, Life Celebration Ministries is about equipping the priesthood of the believers. Anybody that wants to step into this space. And sadly, this is what I want. The reason I'm saying this, I want pastors to hear that when and because we are derelict in our duties to step into that space, others will. So if that sounds like a threat to pastors, go, man, we don't want the laity in it, well, then get involved, And by the way, I think it's a great space for laity to step into a ministry of their own and to be a certified Life Celebration, celebrant. I think that's a great thing, but I just wanted to throw that out there that this is not just for pastors. So,
find evidence in the Word of God anywhere, Jon, where weddings and funerals need to be officiated by professional clergy. There's no evidence of that in the Word of God anywhere. That's just something culturally that we've done and accepted. But if you look through the history of all this was family and tribal. And what we're praying for is that God would raise up that army of individuals. I don't care where they're coming from, but with your audience right now, my heart is breaking. It really is. We're just re-seeing the chaos again in the U.S. that we've seen in Canada.
Yeah.
So may it land on the heart of the receptive heart of the individual who says, "Yeah, call me in. I want to be part of the redemptive ministry of power and presence."
Well, Wayne, I'm going to just say it again, man. Since I met you, I've been bought into your vision. I love what you guys have done and the work that you continue to do, and I want to see it thrive. So that's why we had you back on the show again, just to share all of it. So thank you for being here, and we wish you all the best as you continue to serve God in the way that you're doing it, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much. A real honor.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Entre Pastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the Entre Pastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our Entre Pastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own Entre Pastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.